Hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Morales.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willits.
Here.
All present.
All right, I'll take a motion for exec.
Madam Mayor, pursuant to Idaho Code 74206(1)(f), I move to enter into executive session to communicate with legal counsel to discuss pending or probable litigation.
Second.
Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Excuse me. Yes.
Yes.
Willits.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, we'll be back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to those of you that are here with us for this next multiple items with multiple presentations. And this is the return of the Murio specific plan, the work session that council requested. This is designed to facilitate as much sharing of information between the city and the applicant, the neighborhood, and then I'm going to look back at the city, the entities that would be charged with providing infrastructure and service for the council. So I'm going to go ahead and just, I guess I'll wait a minute while we add another table. Sorry. Oh, it's for the four of you? Yeah, that sounds good. We're going to go at, what do you call it? At ease. All right, we are back. I'll go ahead and have pass this over to Jessica Zelag from planning.
Hello. That work? Great. All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Jessica Zelag. I'm Deputy Planning Director in PDS. And as the mayor mentioned, we're going to have the entire work session today on this topic. So this is to revisit the Murillo Farm specific plan. It is noticed and treated as a continuation of the hearing from May 7th, where council deferred and directed staff to work with the applicant on the financial analysis in the specific plan and then revisit the topic in these work sessions. So first, I'm going to review the agenda for the day. I'm going to start with a recap of the plan and then some of the annexation considerations that council should refer to in making their eventual determination. Then Mike's going to spend about 20 minutes reviewing the financial model, the analysis, and the different assumptions and changes that have been made since the May 7th hearing. We'll then hear from the applicant, David Everly, who is an economist, is going to present for 20 minutes on their look at the financials. We'll hear from both of the neighborhood associations in the area, so South Cole and Southwest Ada County Alliance. They'll each have 15 minutes for a total of 30. Then we'll open it up for question and answers. We have noted here 30 minutes, but we have more time than that. But we have representatives from Boise Police Department, Fire, Parks, representatives from ACHD. So the floor will be open to questions of the applicants, representatives, as well as staff. And then we'll close with next steps. So to recap the project, this is the fourth specific plan that the city has considered. The others are Harris Ranch, Barber Valley, Locale, Syringa, and now this is the fourth, Murillo Farms. This is located in the Southwest Planning area, so outside of Boise city limits in our city area of impact. So it's in Ada County. And for reference, it's about 3 miles from West Victory Road, and then adjacent on the east side of the property there to currently annexed city area along Cole Road. There are two applications related to this project. The first is a request for annexation. This would be for 380 acres. And again, this is another site map just to give context to where we're looking at. The subject property is bordered on the west by Maple Grove, on the east by Cole. We have Lake Hazel on the north, and then the New York Canal is to the south. The image on the right shows in general terms the phasing that the project would come in over a 20-year period. So there would be 15 phases, and it would start in the northeast section. That would be phase 1. Important to note is just as a part of annexation, a requirement is to, as part of the city's sewer extension policy, have sewer access. So that would be coming in from that northeast corner. Followed by phase 2 just below that. And then the other phases, again, start from the north and kind of move throughout the project, with the last bit coming in expected within 20 years along the New York Canal. So the second application is the zoning application. So this is the specific plan itself that lays out what zoning and land uses and type of allowed uses are within the project. So there's a mix of residential and mixed use that will total about 3,541 units. A little more than half of that is single family, where we have about 1,700 units will be multifamily. Important to note, just from the first hearing where you heard this project, the percentage of apartments and townhomes has changed, requested on behalf of the applicant. That does affect the financials and might speak to that, but contemplated in this is 30% apartments and 70% townhomes. Also, the project would include 94,650 square acres of commercial development. There is a public school site, which would be dedicated to West Ada School District, and 55 acres of open space, which includes the parks, pathways, landscape, and buffered areas. It's a little hard to see the legend, but any of the colors that are yellow, orange, and then moving to red are the residentials, and the darker color denotes a higher density. The purple is the commercial, the light blue is the public school area, and then the green is all the open space. So this is a timeline. Mike has a similar timeline that he'll walk through for finances, work on the financial analysis, but this is the timeline for comments on the specific plan from the planning department. To begin, in summer of 2021 is when we first received the first version of the specific plan in the original traffic impact study. This is when the city conducted its first financial analysis, as well as PDS providing comments regarding largely around the street grid, straightening out that grid, and then reducing the amount of commercial density. That direction was to honor the commercial that's contemplated within the locale in the BVA sites about a mile away from that site. So those comments then led to the applicant submitting their second version in the fall of 2022. PDS's comments at this time were again around not the amount of commercial, but really the location of the commercial, requesting the applicant to prioritize commercial on Cole rather than Maple Grove because of the traffic impacts that we were seeing because of the original plan, putting more of an emphasis on Cole. And then also just some comments on site layout and design. The applicant team returned with a third version of that specific plan in the spring of 2023, and this is the plan that we're reviewing today. This plan, though, because of the time between the first submittal and spring of 2023, and then the change in the layout of the project, led to a request from ACHD to revise the traffic impact study. And then important to note that this was during the spring, summer of 2023. There was significant construction occurring on Maple Grove. So the applicant was required to wait till that construction completed and then was able to submit their revised traffic impact study in fall of 2023. So once that traffic impact study was submitted in parallel to ACHG staff working on their project report, the city conducted its second financial analysis, which is what we have in front of us. So that's the difference between the 2021 analysis and the 2023 is that time. That was when we advised the applicant or noted the applicant that our financials were showing that the project was not financially feasible and we would be recommending denial from staff's perspective. The applicant team chose to proceed with hearing and was at Planning and Zoning in winter of 2024, where Planning and Zoning recommended denial of the specific plan, and that brought us to the May 7th hearing in spring of 2024, with council deferring and requesting for additional work sessions on the project. So since the May 7th council hearing, there have been a number of meetings with staff at the city and the applicant team. Most of them have been around the financial analysis, the assumptions, and the model. But I'll note then the June 18th, we did have a work session on the history and other considerations for the entire Southwest planning area and other planning related meetings, including July 26th, where we met on the specific plan and requested a few minor changes related to that plan, mostly around what kind of allowed uses for the commercial we would see in the project, as well as incorporating some of the changes in the modern zoning code that were adopted towards the end of that review period that we still needed to see reflected in the specific plan. On top of that, we had a meeting with our housing team to discuss affordable housing considerations on the project, and that brings us to today on the 27th on the financials. important just to bring up and remind council on. So we have had a few laws go into effect since this project was originally submitted. The first two came in 2021, which have significant impact to the financials. So in 2021, a law went into effect that capped the city's ability to increase the budget by more than 8% annually, as well as a limit on new construction and annexation at 90% of the value when an annexation is conducted. So that is just important to note because it did change the work then that finance had done through their financial analysis. And then two other laws that have gone into effect since then, just recently, July 1 of this year, is the change in the consent to annex, which requires at least 60% of the landowners and 50% of the land. That's not really of consideration for this project because we have consent, but just as important to note for how annexation in general is required to occur. And then also a law on July 1 that now requires us to enter into negotiations with the county to determine our area of impact within the next 2 years. So by December 31st of 2025, every jurisdiction in the state is required to enter into these negotiations with their county. And the area of impact needs to be considered an area that would be annexed within the next 5 years. So you have to speak to what is your plan to annex those areas. By default, if there is no conclusion reached by December 2025, the area of impact would automatically default to 2 miles. So just to note that here. This is a map of the entire Southwest area, and just to speak to that consent requirement. So when we, in the June 18th work session, talked about the entire Southwest area, much of the path to annexation is largely driven by sewer access and where sewer is provided in the area. So historically, since the 70s, the city has had these fits and starts of providing sewer. So having access to sewer is considered then to be consent to annexation. And you can see on the map, everything in the light purple are properties with consent. Without that, we do not have consent, by consent meaning sewer. You can see where Murillo Farms is related to that, and then the boundary of the city. We talked in that work session a bit about the different strategies for annexation, and I'll speak to the findings, but it needs to be contiguous development, access to sewer, and prevention of leapfrog development. For annexation of this entire area, it would begin from Victory Road from the north down south, and because of those laws that limit the growth of the city's budget by 8% annually and the 90% cap, it would need to be done in a number of phases. We don't have information on that today because it requires quite a bit of financial analysis as far as not only what is the tax revenue, there would be limited impact fees here, but then the cost of services and what is the likely path for any area in the Southwest. Each version, probably 20 to 21 different efforts for annexation would be a big undertaking, just as far as that financial analysis and understanding consent. So we'll just kind of leave that today as the map of where we know we have consent, but more information and more work is done on that.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Jessica, could you explain to me properties without consent? Like, what's the status of title on those properties?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash. So by proxy not having sewer, we interpret to mean that we do not have consent because we have not gone out and confirmed whether or not there would be additional consent. So all we know is that they do not have sewer access.
Okay.
All right, so a reminder here on the legal findings, and this is where the planning team makes their determinations for their recommendations. Our findings for annexation require that any annexation request incorporates the Boise sewer planning area, honors negotiated areas of impact agreements, attempts to balance cost of services with anticipated revenues, and promotes other goals of population balance, contiguous development, and the prevention of costs due to leapfrog development. As far as next steps, so we'll have a number of other speakers, but just to flag for council, at the end of today's hearing, there is a desire to set a future hearing date or additional work sessions, really at your determination for what you'd like to have happen next. But to note, request that we will need to have a new version of the specific plan submitted prior to a next hearing. We're reviewing version 3 right now, but we've discussed a number of changes and we'll just need a new plan submitted. So that's the official plan that we're looking at eventual hearing. And I'll turn it over to Mike.
Can you advance slides for me? Madam Mayor, members of the council, I am Mike Chirac. I work in the budget office in the city's finance function. And as Jessica mentioned, this here where we've been doing analysis is about Muriel Farms as proposed annexation. It does reside in that southwest area that has not been annexed and poses a number of challenges, including financial challenges, to annex that. But we just want to make that point that this is just Muriel Farms. So like Jessica, I thought I would take us back on our journey since May, just to give you a refresh there. The May 7 public hearing, we were directed to review our analysis and assumptions, work with the applicant, and return for a later work session, and here we are. On May 29th, we issued a memo to you on what we believed we were supposed to do. We also detailed our assumptions from 2021 and the assumptions we were using in 2023. On June 14th, we issued a memo to you with an updated financial analysis. We made a number of changes and refinements to the assumptions and the model. We still get a negative financial result as of that time. Then on June 18th, that was the Southwest area work session. And I spoke briefly there about the very large cost and other annexation challenges are posed there if we look at that. Then on June 20th, a couple of days later, we did meet with the applicant regarding that June 14th analysis and the financial model. The applicant provided a document. We discussed that at that meeting. They had some questions. Then on July 18th, we updated the model with 2 changes. We increased the number of townhomes at that point, and we also added some police staff professional costs, non-officers. And in talking with police, this goes back to 2021, they had raised the point that for every 4 police officers, we have a staff person, somebody who's at City Hall West supporting officers and so on. So we did add that cost along with increasing the number of townhomes from, we got that from information from the applicant. We sent that model to the applicant and communicated where we were, answered some questions. That's where the model is as of now. Next slide. So on June 14th, the first update to the analysis, the key takeaway, we're still negative at 20 years and particularly 30 years. To make it easier, it's an easier concept to grasp. We've gotten away from showing you this net present value analysis, which is a financial concept. And we're just showing all the revenues. So this is base revenues and one-time revenues and all the expenses. They're all in there. And at 20 years, it's about $1 million loss. 30 years, it is $17.4 million as of that version of the model. And that's a big difference. And one thing we want to press upon you is we are really focused on that 30-year, because as the development is done, the impact fees have been paid, the development fee revenues on permits and things like that, on houses being built, those are no longer there. We just have our property tax. And as we discussed, property tax is lower on new construction. We're limited to 3%. And so that is what we're really focused on is long-term costs here that would go on indefinitely.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Mike, on the 30-year figure, the net loss, is that an annual figure or is that between 20 and 30 years, there's $16 million difference? Is that spread out across that decade?
Madam Mayor, Council President, that is the summation of the losses through 30 years. A couple slides down, I've got a graph showing the losses accelerate as you get past the build out approximately year 18 or thereabouts.
Okay,
So if
thank
you can
you.
hold tight, I'll show you that. So next slide. This is just moving forward the model to July 18th. And again, we increased the number of townhomes from 40% to 70%. And we added this police professional staff position, 1 for every 4 police officers. And now the 20-year, if you sum up the losses over the 20 years, it's 3 million. And then at the 30-year, it's 22.5 million. Again, we're focused on the 30-year, and the losses accelerate once we get out of that build out. Next slide. So this graph, Council President, hopefully helps answer your question. The top line is marked expenses, and you can see around years 16, 17, they keep going. And the revenues is the next line. And as of that point, you have a divergence. The one-time revenues are gone. We just have property tax, a little bit of liquor tax, some franchise fees and that. But that is the issue there. And then the lower line is the net loss. And again, years 16, 17, 18, that line starts dropping below. By year 24, we're at $2 million a year, and it grows from there. So that is, again, our concern. Building infrastructure is one thing. We have impact fees. Once you get it built, it's the long-term cost. Public safety in particular is expensive. Next slide. This just takes those losses and gives a cumulative loss if we add them up. And the lower right there, where the line goes down, you're at 22.5 million. So again, it's just the long-term losses. Now we just wanted to give you an update on the assumptions, because that is what underlies the model. So we'll walk through the assumptions now to get you up to speed on where we landed. This slide I turn over to Deputy Chief Brooks. He is going to walk through that one.
Good morning, Mayor and members of council. Tammany Brooks, I'm the Deputy Chief for the Boise Police Department. As Mike mentioned, and as mentioned in previous presentations, prior assumptions for police staffing centered around an average per capita level of our benchmark peer cities of 1.8 officers per thousand. Currently, the Boise Police Department has an authorized strength of 1.3 officers per thousand with a goal of 1.5 officers per thousand. And the analysis presented today reflects that 1.5 goal. Additionally, prior analysis did not include the professional staff needed to support the increase in sworn staff, and now the analysis includes the 1 professional staff member for every 4 officers.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Hi, Deputy Chief. Question for you on this one. So, we've talked a little bit about the averages of peer cities. I think if you take 3 cities and you say each of them has 1.5 officers per thousand, it doesn't mean they have all the same police procedures, positioning, staff, prioritization, issues, that kind of thing. Just kind of what's your, this is just one data point. Is this the only data point we're looking at comparing to peer cities right now?
Madam Mayor and council member, that's the only metric that we're looking at currently for this project.
Okay. Madam Mayor, in looking at our peer cities, we do rank our peer cities based on closeness of characteristics. Our top 3 are Reno, Lincoln, and Spokane. Those currently average to just under 1.3. Does that sound about accurate for those peer cities?
Madam Mayor and council member, I'm not sure of those 3 in particular. I've only seen the number for the average of all of the peer cities.
Okay. These were numbers that were shared with me for staff. So, so looking at those, do you have any idea? A couple of those cities are pretty close to us. Do you have any idea if they plan to elevate staffing at this time?
Madam Mayor and council member, I don't know if they do. I could tell you for us, the level that we have right now at the 1.3 and our aspirational goal of 1.5 is really designed to look at what we're providing to the level of service to our community and trying to maintain the low level of crime that we have compared to the other comparable cities.
Thanks.
Okay, back on Mike here with other assumptions, and I think 1.2 is the 1.8 we have determined is that aspirational goal. 1.5 is our current goal. So on to the fire assumption there. Our starting point was 3-person staffing. As we have gone to 4-person staffing in the east end of the city on the periphery, and Northwest, we're going with 4-person staffing there. We now assume that this would be on the southwest part of the city, and that also would be 4-person staffing. So that is the assumption now. On housing prices. In May, we spent some time talking about housing prices and were they, adequate? Were they too low? The starting point for single-family homes was 475,000, and for multifamily units, it was 175,000. Again, we spent some time talking with our real estate manager and looking at things. We have increased them a bit. Home prices are now 12,500 higher on a comparable basis, and multifamily units are up to 200,000. And again, we grow those 3% every year without fail. So the prices do go up. There's not a recession baked in or anything. So we think we're getting plenty high on housing prices. We also added townhomes into the mix. So 70% of the multifamily units are now townhomes, and we have valued those at 362,500. Also, rental housing was a point at the public hearing. We did not have rental housing in there. Basically, that means that there's no homeowners exemption. There's a little more property tax paid. The current model, as we have it in June and July, has 10% for single-family houses and then 40% for townhomes. Also, on property tax, the model had 3%, the maximum allowable. We have adjusted that to the average of the last 10 years, where we've not taken 3% every year, and we have 2.65% in there now. Also, public transportation costs for Valley Regional Transit. This came along about 2019 where we started this. We did not have that in the model. As we look at it, we've done it for a number of years now. We're planning to do it again for fiscal year 25. We do have that in as a cost. Other considerations that have been discussed in memos or at hearing, the commercial space, Jessica mentioned that, about 95,000 square feet. I understand that is one area where I think the two sides agree that that is a good amount of commercial space. We have not changed our assumptions from that 95,000. Originally, I think there was more. The order of development was raised as a possibility. Would this change the analysis? We've looked at that. We really don't see that it would have any change. This is residential development, and whether you have more townhomes or apartments up front versus single-family homes, we just don't see that would really change the analysis. This is more of a structural consideration going back to the reduction of property tax. And again, our costs have gone up a lot in the last few years with inflation. Police officer cost. Years ago, we would use an entry-level police officer. In one of the analyses here, we moved to a 5-year officer as a proxy. And now we have just looked at what is the average police officer cost. And we're using the fiscal year 25 budgeted cost for police officers as an average. We do get a number of lateral hires now, and so we think that is the best number to use.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Mike, do you know the differences in those between the average first year, 5-year, and if you'd consider using a median?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, or Council President, I do have some numbers. I don't know if I have them printed out, but I can try to get to those a little later on, maybe in the Q&A. I can have that.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Also, another point that was raised was a community infrastructure district. We have discussed that a little bit internally. My understanding is that such a district would require someone to kind of run that and drive that process. We don't really see that here. Also, infrastructure is, we assume it's most all covered with impact fees. Some of the park costs we don't think will be impact fee eligible, but infrastructure is really one thing. And again, it's a long-term operating cost we're focused on. We have not gone past that point. We don't see that there is interest in going that route here. The next point, private parks versus city parks. Just want to reiterate, we have not strayed from using city parks. private parks have been discussed. We see them as a very different thing. I've discussed that with Doug Holloway a bit. He is here and can talk to that if there are questions on that. Park impact fee usage elsewhere, that also was raised. Would the development pay more impact fees than it more than its share? We look at that as it really doesn't affect the analysis. We're assuming impact fees cover the infrastructure, which is a bit of a generous assumption. You may have seen some of the council members, particularly been here for a few years. Oftentimes the impact fees in a fast rising environment don't cover all the costs, but we do assume those cover costs here. So if there's extra impact fees, we just don't see that really affecting anything. The homeowners exemption, we also put in a memo that has been static at 125,000 for a few years. Going back almost 10 years ago now, that was indexed for a while. So that is just something that in time that could change. That could go up with house prices, and that could have some effect on the analysis, reduce the tax revenue we get. And then last, affordable housing, there was a meeting on that.
I'm sorry, I don't recall what you did with the analysis. Did you leave the homeowners exemption as is?
Madam Mayor, yes, we did.
Okay.
It uses 125,000 throughout the model. So if it were to go up, we're a little aggressive on what we're assuming property tax would be. And then affordable housing, there was a meeting. We have not done anything in the model for that. Affordable housing may be a small amount of the property mix. It may not result in any change in the model, but the applicant may talk to that. So our conclusions, we want to lead again with just annexation is harder to justify financially. In 2021, the 10% reduction to property tax revenue, we just can't overstate that. That changes things greatly. Also, again, about the same time, the pandemic, inflation, our costs have really gone up. You've seen some, public safety contracts and even general employees, staff costs more, a lot of things cost more, construction costs more. So that is also coming into play here a lot. Again, per that graph I showed you, the operating losses accelerate. As the build out is done, the one-time revenues are no longer there. We just have property tax. The losses get bigger and bigger. And that again is where we're focused. 30-year is really what we think is representative of the subsidy that would be required for this development, unfortunately. As we look at losses in the future, where it would kind of come home to roost in our planning is our long-range planning. We would start looking at, new infrastructure, impact fees hopefully cover that. But as we see that out there, we would look at that as something that would further tighten our ability to put investments elsewhere. So this would affect the existing city as far as city programs, services, investments. It's getting harder to do because of the first point with revenues going down, costs going up, but this would make it more so, unfortunately. And the last point is, again, we cannot make the development revenues cover the projected costs using reasonable assumptions.
Mike, you mentioned the 90% with the legislature saying that we actually can't take the full growth. What are we losing out, or what's it look like if we were allowed to have growth pay for itself, that the 100% versus 90%?
Madam Mayor, yesterday I looked at one of the models, the latest model, and I plugged in 100%. 20 years, it gets to a positive result. It's much closer at 30 years. It doesn't quite turn positive, but it would go a long way. And then again, if we could turn back the clock and some of our costs would not have gone up so much, that is the analysis essentially we got to in 2021, is it did pencil. But it is a straight 10% off the revenues, and it is a very large part of it is that property tax reduction.
Okay, thanks.
That is the end of my slides here. I don't know if there are questions now or Q&A later, but I'm done with my part of the presentation.
Madam Mayor. Mike, I don't know if you're prepared to be able to provide these numbers today, but I think I would like to see what it would look like with police staffing at the current 1.3. Likewise, I think, are we going to be hearing anything from budget today in terms of property taxes over the next several years or anything like that? No, I think, have we had analysis of what 1.5 officers per thousand does to our normal budget without this development? Outside of this, have we seen those numbers at all?
Are you asking if 1.5 was used in the staffing analysis that was done last year?
Well, I know it was used for the base analysis.
I don't
but-
mean for this.
yeah.
The department did a
Yeah,
staffing
yes,
analysis
yes,
overall.
Yeah. Okay.
Deputy Chief, when that staffing analysis was done for both police and fire, what number did you use?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure of the question. When the staffing analysis was done, I think they were looking to see what staff level we would need to continue providing the level of service, but I don't know what the end result to that was.
All right, that's the question he has. I mean,
Yeah,
there
Madam
was
Mayor.
the council approved several years ago the staffing analysis to help inform the number of new officers we needed over the years. So the level of service currently that we provide, what number do we use? I guess what I'd like you to get is the number that was used for that staffing analysis that was presented to us. That's what the council member's asking, is how the department came up with the number of new officers we needed absent Murio that was presented to us a year and a half ago.
Understood.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just one quick question for fire, make sure that I understood the slide correctly. Right now we have some stations where we use 3-person and other ones where we use 4, and we're typically using the 4-person staffing on some of our outlier
Yep.
kind of areas where there isn't another station close by to add support. And that's why we're assuming that this would be a 4-person one because there's nothing else around. Is that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, yeah, you are correct. So the new station that would be built in that area would be a perimeter station, and we would be looking to staff with 4 people.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, next we will hear from David Everly. Welcome.
Mayor and council, I'll just begin with a couple preliminary comments, if I may, and then I'll introduce and turn it over to Dr. Eberly here. So first of all, thank you. This is a great forum and opportunity. We really appreciate the time that you're putting into this. We know as a team that this has been a long process for us, as you've heard us describe, and you just heard Jessica repeat. But we also know this is a huge endeavor for you as a city, and so we really appreciate all the time. In addition to the number of meetings that were recited by Jessica and Mike, there were others. We've spent a lot of time with staff, and we really appreciate all of the time and attention that they've put into this. We've asked for meetings, and they give them. Mike and his team have done a great job, and I appreciate the walkthrough of the assumptions. They've changed quite a few things. They've listened to us on quite a few things. So just want to extend a big thank you on all of that. We remain very excited about this project, and you'll hear from Dr. Eberly here about our continued review of the most recent fiscal analysis from finance. We believe that as you hear that and you think about all of the other considerations that you do take into account when you're thinking about annexation, we remain excited that this is going to be a great opportunity for the Southwest and for the city as a whole. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Eberly, and then I will remain available with him and other members of the team for questions afterwards. Dr. Eberly has consulted with cities and developers on capital improvement plans and fiscal impact studies. He is a former Boise City Council member and Capital City Development Commissioner. He has worked with the U.S. Department of Interior and U.S. Environmental Protection Agency on economic issues. He has conducted economic damages models on behalf of plaintiffs and defendants in court cases, and he's taught economics at both Boise State University and the College of Idaho. And we appreciate his continued efforts to respond to information from the city and to work with the city to try to find as much common ground as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is David Eberly, and I was.
David, we can't, and yeah, we can't hear you. I mean, we can hear you, but nobody else
I'm out
can.
of practice.
Bring it a little closer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is David Eberly, and I reside at 3648 North Willowbar Way in Garden City. That long introduction of who I am, it's what happens after 50 years of working. I am going to read notes just so I stay on time. As a retired professor, I tend to want to wander. So bear with me if I'm looking down. Today, I'm here to present my review of the City Department of Finance, or DFA's, most recent updated model dated to us July 24th, 2024. That's the same as the July 18th. It's just when we received it. Which
David,
analyzed-
I just want to see if I'm hearing you naturally. I'm not convinced that,
Better?
yeah, online, and Councilmember Willetts is online.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I'd pull it even closer, sorry.
Generally, I'm
Or
overwhelming.
lift it, I don't know, but
You're making me
There you
nervous,
go.
Mayor. All right. I am here to present my review of the City Department of Finance, or DFA's, most recent updated model dated July 24th, 2024, which is the date on the memo, and it corresponds to the July 18th referred by Mike, which analyzed the fiscal impact of annexing the Muriel Farms project. I want to start with just a few high-level comments about fiscal impact models that will put my more specific comments into context. First, models are a product of their assumptions, and understanding their assumptions will inform how to interpret the forecast. Second, models are inherently uncertain. As models project further into the future, two things are true. One, models will converge towards historic trends. As much as we think we live in exceptional times, historic trends show that we don't. Second, structural changes due to new technologies or climate change cannot be predicted, and they will deviate the future from the historic trends. These two conflicting trends make future forecasting a very inexact art. And finally, because of this, forecast models are just one consideration in the overall decision-making process for annexation. Based on the previous slide's points about the impact of assumptions and the effects of uncertainty, forecasting the future requires a set of model runs, not just one. The base case should closely approximate historic trends. The conservative case should model assumptions below the historic trends, and the aggressive case should model assumptions above historic trends. Conducting modeling in this manner provides the mayor and council with a continuum of possible futures, and certainly more than three may be warranted the further out you go into the future. Do we get there? Yes. Okay, I'm not going to spend much time on this slide other than to say these are assumptions in the DFA model that will impact the output of the model. I have concerns with several of these assumptions, but they are not addressed in this review. In other words, I left all these DFA assumptions as they were. So our model matches DFA's assumptions on all these assumptions.
I'm just curious, which ones did you have concern with?
Oh, well, I have concern with inflation.
Like you think it'll be more or less?
I think it's less than what they project. And secondly, there are concerns with managing the budget versus the assumptions inherent in the model itself. I have not reviewed these in depth. I did not ask for, 30 years of private budget making, which is what would be required to do an in-depth analysis of the internal operating expenses of the city.
Thanks.
And that'll become clear in a slide or two. Okay, so this says part two, just for your reference to show the difference between the two tables. These are the assumptions in the DF model that we have considered. To review, I vary them across 3 model scenarios of conservative, base, and aggressive. I've labeled the DFA assumptions as conservative, for they are, for the most part, below historic trends. First, for the allowed base revenue increase, I use 3% for the base case, that's the middle column, because it reflects the available revenues that Murillo Farm brings to the city, whether used or not. The second assumption I review is the most impactful on the model output. It is new construction growth rate value, and that's a wordful, but really it's the rate at which housing increases value. During the last 28 years, housing values in Ada County grew 11% annually. DFA uses 3%. I present 5% as the base case. Back in the 70s, that was a normal metric, which is still a conservative number compared to the historic trend. And I present 7% as the aggressive case, which is still well below the 28-year value trend in the city and valley. The third assumption I review is starting housing unit values. These values are important because of the compounding effect within the model. And again, that will be seen shortly. The conservative case has DFA's assumed values. The base case uses Columbia Village as a comparable neighborhood. And the aggressive model uses the estimates provided by the developer team as their target values once they start building. Further support for the base case value comes from the Ada County assessor's records, which show an average valuation of $531,000 for single-family homes currently in the valley. The fourth assumption I review is the police level of service, just to consider different future possibilities. Today, this mayor and council has determined that 1.5 officers per 1,000 residents is the appropriate level of service. Over the next 30 years, there will be 15 city elections, one every 2 years. Further officials may adopt a different standard due to technological and other changes. So the aggressive model incorporates one future possibility. Our base case is the same as DFA's in their updated model, and our future aggressive model shows 1.3. Did I get the right page? No, sorry. I stuck a page in here. Thanks. Thank you. This slide shows the results of the model run at 20 years and 30 years. DFA's recommended conclusions are shown as the conservative case. Even those are not that extremely different from a net neutral on an annual basis. The base case, which is most aligned with historic trends for growth rates with the current starting valuations for similar homes, is positive. This used all but 3 of DFA's assumptions. The purpose of this review is to illustrate the widely divergent impacts that a model's assumptions can have when extended out over 30 years. Changes to all 4 of the assumptions described in the prior slide results in a 150% change in the conclusions. For example, at 30 years, the swing from conservative to aggressive goes from a negative $8 million to a positive $48 million, or an approximate $40 million swing. The DFA recommends a scenario that is not consistent with historic trends. There are other reasonable scenarios for the council to consider. And as an economist, if I had to pick only one model run, I would pick the one based on historic trends, the base case. Because the base case has the most probable outcome based on past experience.
Except, so this is super interesting to me. So I'm just gonna ask a question here, but in the base case, you did not change the city's growth in costs, the inflationary measure for city employees because you
No.
didn't have the 30 days, the 30 years of history?
That's
kept
correct.
it at
It's much
3%.
more extensive if I were to do it justice. So I just assumed what the city is the expert on that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what does this review tell us? The most important takeaway is that the fiscal impact analysis may be helpful, but it is never definitive. And a base case model based on historic trends will be the most probable than not picture of the future. The conclusion is that annexation decisions are better based on land use than probabilistic models. Nonetheless, using DFA's model and reviewing just a few of the assumptions over a few scenarios can provide the mayor and council with good information to use among the other considerations for annexation. Did I skip one? Ah, there it is. I have just one final slide to briefly address the capital impacts of annexing Muriel Farms. The city determines what each development must pay to cover its proportionate share of impacts on capital for police, fire, and parks. This process follows state law and involves the city adoption of a capital improvements plan and an impact fee schedule. Muriel Farms will pay 100% of what the city determines is required by paying the assessed impact fees. Based on the current schedule, Muriel will pay over $19 million in impact fees to the city to pay for the city's capital needs. If and when the city updates the CIP to address changes in cost, construction or equipment, other capital expenditures, then Muriel will pay 100% of that amount. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me? Thanks.
Any questions for David? Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. We will now hear from Marissa Keith with the Southwest Ada County Alliance Neighborhood Association. Welcome, Marissa.
Mayor, council members, my name is Marissa Keith. I'm with the Southwest Ada County Alliance Neighborhood Association. I'm the president there. To start off with, SWACA is not necessarily opposed to this land being developed. We realize that something will go there eventually. And I think, at least personally, I would rather see something like Muriel Farms than something developed under county standards. But our mission and our objective is to determine whether development will be beneficial or detrimental to our community, partly from a financial standpoint, but also just from a quality of life and a safety perspective. So the main concerns that we've heard from our neighborhood are transportation, of course, emergency services, and the insufficient commercial space. So this is from the Ada County Highway District staff report. This is probably one of the most strongly worded staff reports that I've seen come out of the Highway District in the many, many years that I've been reading their staff reports. It talks about significant traffic congestion in the surrounding area is anticipated to occur at the build out. It does not believe that this level of traffic congestion is reasonable. The anticipated congestion cannot be mitigated in a reasonable manner, and they have significant concerns regarding the impact of such growth on the existing community. So Muriel Farms would add 21,000 car trips per day to Southwest Boise. It would require, under their traffic impact study, it would require the expansion of 15 intersections and 13 roadways that are outside of the current ACHD capital improvement plan. Even if that were to occur, and of course, road expansion doesn't have to occur just because a traffic impact study says it needs to, it would still there would be significant delays at peak hour. It would require multiple red lights to get through intersections. The increase in travel time impacts people's gas prices, their wallets, their ability to have leisure time at home, their quality of life, sometimes their safety when people get angry and start running red lights. This is the ACHD 5-year work plan from 2022 to 2026, and it shows the road improvements that were scheduled in the area. And if you'll see, like, there's nothing around Murillo Farms for the last 5 years. Really, the only improvements that were supposed to happen was the orchard realignment and Cloverdale between Overland and Victory, and neither of those two projects happened. And in fact, Cloverdale actually was supposed to be widened. That section was supposed to be widened between 2021 and 2025. Then it went to 2026. And then in this current draft proposal, which is going before the ACHD Commission on September 25th, it's now been moved out to 2027. So the same thing happened with a section of Victory Road in a staff report from another project in 2017. It was supposed to be widened in between 2021 and 2025, and then it went to future, and now it's still this sometime in the future. We don't know when. So it's frustrating, I think, for citizens when they see staff reports. They read like, oh yes, this road will be widened or improved. City council members, Ada County commissioners, they base their decisions on these plans, and then the plans change, and all of a sudden a road that was supposed to be widened at least by next year is now another 5 years in the future. We don't know when. And I know that ACHD and the city of Boise try to be good work partners and support each other, but this is the next rendition of the 5-year work plan, and there still are no significant road improvements for the area around Murillo Farms. And this is not, traffic is one thing. People get frustrated. The level of service on all of these roads is F at the peak hour. But this is the current condition of most of the roads around Murillo Farms. This one with the woman pushing the baby carriage, that's Maple Grove. We have extruded curb, but it's a 2-lane road. The one with the speed limit sign, that's Cloverdale. There's no sidewalks. It's also a 2-lane road. So it's not just a cost to the highway district and to expand these roads and to the taxpayers to push these roads forward. The 21,000 cars that this will add is also a cost to people's safety. And I think people tend to focus on the traffic element. How long is it going to take me? And certainly I think the longer it takes people to drive home or to drive to work, to drive back home, that factors into the desirability of living in an area, which will also affect the price of a home or the market price of a home. I live Cloverdale and Victory. If I leave downtown Boise past 4:30, it takes me an hour to drive home. An extra 21,000 cars, I don't know how long that's going to take me. I can bike it faster, but it's going to take me an hour if I drive it. So I think that level of service is what people focus on with traffic. But when we think about level of service, when we talk about fire and EMS, it's not a measure of convenience. Level of service with traffic is a measure of convenience or inconvenience. Level of service for emergency services is a life and death thing. And so the Boise Fire Department, they have stated in their document in the file that Murillo could only build 400 of the 3,500 homes before a new fire station is built. We have service from a multitude of different agencies out there, all trying to provide coverage. I am not sure of what the response times are. I could not find any data on that. We have people that would love to know that information, but we could not find data on that. This is from the City of Boise 2025 proposed budget, and it talks about how there are several fire stations that are going to be needing just some updating in the next couple of years at a cost of about almost 16 million. And then another 13 million on investments just to maximize their lifespan. And then it talks about that the cost to construct a single new fire station can exceed $15 million. So when we talk about Murillo Farms, 400 homes and you need a new fire station, that's $15 million that you're going to have to put into a new fire station. And that's just to build the fire station. That's not staffing and ongoing maintenance for future years. So this slide talks about commercial uses in Southwest Boise. In 2022, we did a partnership with a class at Boise State. It was suburbs and small cities, and they were studying commercial uses in Southwest Boise, just trying to determine where they were, what the location, if we had sufficient commercial space. And this is the map from there. And there's an entire PDF on this I can send if you'd like to read it. But as you know, most of it is along Overland there, and a little bit at the Neighborhood Activity Center there at 5 Mile and Lake Hazel. Commercial services is something that is in very much need out in Southwest Boise. We talk about creating walkable neighborhoods, which increases quality of life, brings economic viability to places, creates jobs for our kids. And I'm surprised that I did not know that Murillo used to have more commercial space, and I'm kind of disappointed to hear that that was decreased. We actually are trying to get more commercial space out there, working with the county to try to do that. So any opportunity that we can have to increase commercial space, we will take that. And I think that there is some confusion about the amount of commercial space that is included in Murillo Farms, because in one of the reports, it says that while there's 94,000 square feet of commercial space, that 65,000 of that is for the school. And so there's only actually about 30,000 that is commercial. And so that just might be something to clarify. That was in one of the reports that is in the file.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
Marissa, can I ask you that I love this graphic here.
Mhm.
Can you point out the grocery locations? The one by Desert Avenue was a surprise, but then the only other ones off of Overland, is that correct?
So there's a grocery store at 5 Mile and Lake Hazel. It's a small Albertsons. And then they just built a new Albertsons at Amity and Eagle Road. And then there's one at 5 Mile. There's 2 grocery stores at 5 Mile and Overland.
Thank you.
But in any case, yes, more commercial space is always needed out there. So like I said, our mission as a neighborhood association is to make our community the best it can possibly be. Infrastructure needs in Southwest Boise. I know the city is not responsible for all of this, but roads, desperate need of improved roads, pedestrian bike facilities, public parks. Although this Murillo Farms will include private parks, those are not a substitute for public parks. HOAs, while initially they may be welcoming to everybody, 20 years from now, that HOA board might have different ideas. And HOAs are fiercely protective of their private parks. And I would hate to get in a situation in the future where all parks in Southwest Boise are privately owned, except for Mergerdio and Peppermint, which are the 2 that we have now. I think it's short-sighted to accept a private park in place of a public park. Open space, libraries, schools. Disappointing to see that the West Ada School District did not even send in documentation on this proposal, because while a school site is dedicated, it's up to the taxpayers to pass a bond to fund that new school and to provide the ongoing taxes to staff that school. Pathways, and of course, police and fire. One thing I would like to point out about the level of service for police and fire, whether it's 1.3 or 1.5, I think calculating the time that it will take for an officer to travel the distance all the way out to Murillo Farms should be taken into account, unless they are just going to be assigned to and hanging out in Southwest Boise. So, in conclusion, like I said, we're not opposed to this necessarily. I wish this were closer in. I wish this were somewhere, off Victory Road and it made more financial sense for the city. I would say if the city were to approve it, that it be heavily conditioned to coincide with road improvements and fire protections. If it is denied, they do have the option to go to the county, but without sewer access, they are restricted to either providing their own private sewer facilities or septic, which I think it's 2.5 acres per septic tank out there. I believe that's all. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember? I'm gonna go here and then here. Go
I
ahead.
I wanted to ask the applicant a question about the parks, if I can. So I know that we've kind of been back and forth on what the park could look like. Would it be private? Would it be donated? Do you know where it stands now, what that would look like in the latest
Yes,
version?
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Stead. Yes, we have met with Parks Department along with planning staff, and they did communicate that they would like those parks to be public. And the applicant is amenable to that, to letting the city own and operate that, to keep those open to the public. Of course, there will be the smaller pocket park type things or the community center that the HOA would continue to run for the community itself, but the larger parks, we're open to that as well, if that's what the city would like to continue to operate. My understanding is that's what's been reflected in the fiscal analysis as well.
Thank
Madam Mayor, yeah. Marissa, thanks so much for coming. Can you flip back to your ACHD project slide? There it is. So I think what you're asking is that if we were to approve it, you'd want to see conditions to make sure that some of these projects lined up at the same time. And I think that you're specifically talking about Cole Road and Maple Grove, question mark?
Lake Hazel would be one.
Lake
And
Hazel Extension or Lake Hazel?
I would just Lake Hazel. That is a 2-lane road that is scheduled to go to 5. And then Maple Grove is the other one there. And quite honestly, the orchard realignment needs to be looked at again, because the only way to get across the freeway, the 2 closest ones are Orchard and Cole Road, and the next closest overpass is Eagle.
And Cole Road at this point is, you think, where it needs to be width-wise?
Cole Road, it's tricky because you'd have to take out a lot of housing to widen Cole Road. And so I'm not in favor really of eminent domain to take people's houses, but the highway district has, I think, been discussing that more. But I do believe the highway district is here. But in my opinion, those do need to be moved up on the schedule if this neighborhood is to be built. Otherwise, you just are adding so many cars to roads that are already over capacity at these peak hours.
And you mentioned the Orchard realignment, but you haven't mentioned the Lake Hazel extension.
I would take all of them, actually.
But those are the main ones, are Orchard, Lake Hazel, and Maple Grove.
Mhm.
Great, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Marissa, I think what you've shown us is there's a part of town you're advocating for that maybe feels a little neglected right now with some of the infrastructure needs that you've demonstrated. I think I could look at that 2 ways. One, why are we proposing more when we don't have what we need already down there? Or 2, how can we leverage this development to give Southwest Boise like the types of infrastructure improvements that it needs to improve the quality of life there? So my question is, in order for this to benefit the folks in Southwest Boise and their quality of life, like what do you need to see from us, ACHD? What specific, we've talked about the ACHD infrastructure needs. Councilmember Harold Burton's kind of drilled into that, but what else do you need to see down there that would make this a net positive for folks down there?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, I think with a lot of the developments is they drill on this, that they're an asset to the community, and they come in and they don't bring something to the community. They bring traffic to the community, and that's about all. And so I think having things like public parks, this Murillo Farms, other than that little section of Maple Grove that it is adjacent to, it's not, because it doesn't touch Lake Hazel. It doesn't touch the section of Maple Grove that needs to be fixed or widened. They can't require it. And so unless the developer is benevolent and says, yes, I'd like to do that, I'd like to put a crossing there where one is scheduled to be, it's unfortunately the way that this land is situated, we can't ask for that because it's not, well, I guess we could ask for it, but it's not a requirement at this point. Ideally, I would love to say, like when Syringa or Locale went in, they worked with Corey Barton to get that Lake Hazel road extended over to Orchard. And that was a little bit before my time on the neighborhood association. So I don't know all the details to that, but that was part of the requirement. But again, his subdivision touched that section of road.
Okay. And could you maybe speak to a little bit more, like, I think one situation I'm really worried about is Southwest Boise stays the same, has the same deficits that you've talked about, has the same lack of commercial space, has the same lack of road improvements, but there's an additional, I don't know, 200 to 400 homes on septic down there. Like, describe to me a future like that and how that would feel for Southwest Boise.
I think that would be really sad because I think that's kind of what has got us into this position that we're in now, is kind of this lack of planning. And I think people, while they like that kind of country feel, they also are starting to realize that like country living in the city isn't working out so well and is kind of something that's in the past. And they want things like walkable communities. They want to be able to walk to shops. They want their kids to be able to walk to school and to parks and things. And the issue is, do we put 3,500 homes in there without the infrastructure, or do we let the infrastructure catch up? And because the roads improvements, the road widenings, I hate calling them improvements because they're not always improvements. The road widenings are coming. It's just that they're not there yet. And I think even with all of those widenings, it's not going to solve all the problems. It will help, having things like the bus routes and encouraging biking and other things. But I think people are starting to realize that if you live in a city, that it's truly going to be a city. It's not going to be necessarily suburbs.
Madam Mayor, last question. Marissa, we haven't really talked about it much today. It doesn't sound like it helps us with our long-term operating costs. But with the infrastructure deficits and that you've identified here, I can't keep going back to and our limited ability to collect more revenue on an ongoing basis. I keep going back to the idea of a community improvement district in this area. Is that anything you've talked about or given thought to or have any experience in that you could, how can we identify more opportunities to capture revenue to benefit this area and Could we use impact fees for surrounding areas? I don't know the constraints that we have on impact fees for down there. Could you just speak to maybe if you've talked about CID down there and how that might help the community?
I don't know much about them. I know that the fees can be used, they have to be used to benefit the community. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to be used maybe within the district, but they can be used surrounding it as long as they benefit the district. We don't have any, obviously, in Southwest Boise, so it's not something that our neighborhood association is well versed in.
Madam Mayor, do we have ACHD here? I'd love to ask a question of them. Hi. I'm curious about, I guess, if the city of Boise were to say, let's fully prioritize these projects around this part of town, Orchard, Lake Hazel, Maple Grove, and do them as quickly as possible. And if the commission was aligned to that, what kind of impact, I guess, would that have on the other projects on the list and other priorities maybe in different parts of and around the city? I tried to, maybe the mic's turned off. You just have to press that button on top.
Green must mean go. Okay. Sorry about that. Madam Mayor, council members, for the record, Christy Inselman, I'm the planning supervisor at Ada County Highway District, and it's under my group that we developed the integrated 5-year work plan. In answer to your question, yes, I mean, things would have to shift pretty significantly. One of the challenges in the Southwest Boise area is because there are so many improvements that are needed in that area. We can't do all of them at once. There has to be a timing thing. We have to be able to shut roads down and leave parallel corridors open in order to do that. But yes, I mean, if we were to shift priorities to try to accelerate more of the projects in this area, that would mean we'd have to delay others in the county. We program based on needs countywide. So that's why this area, you are seeing more projects that are popping up in the integrated 5-year work plan because there are needs here, but we have to balance that across the entire county. So there's needs in every jurisdiction. So yes, I mean, the short answer is yes, we could potentially accelerate, but there's going to be a balancing to get them done. That's why you see some of them staggered as well, because we also can't shut down parallel corridors. We have to still have traffic flowing in some way.
Madam Mayor, while we have you up here,
Yeah.
MRSA highlighted the ACHD comments on this project, and in those comments, it noted corridor commute times and those increases. The average increase would be about 10 minutes. I was curious if those corridor commute times were calculated based off of current capacity and planned projects, and just didn't want to assume that it wouldn't include any other improvements that are being asked for by the neighborhood association.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, I'm now going to pull the other Christy up here because she works in development services. So she's that's where the reports come from. I'm long range planning and she's current planning. So we tag team this one.
Good morning, Christy Little, Development Services Manager at ACHD. And yes, that was based on an assumption of today's, where we are at today. It didn't take into account increased volumes or other improvements, but one can assume that that number only gets bigger over time.
Madam Mayor, maybe just to clarify, I think what I'm talking about is the corridor commute times. There was comment about with Murio, with the future development, that times would increase by about 10 minutes. I just wanted to know if that included just current infrastructure and planned projects. Maybe it's just current infrastructure. I'm assuming it doesn't include any proposed projects that Marissa is highlighting.
All right, we've got clarification over here from the traffic engineer. It includes projects that are in the CIP.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, if I may, Christy, thank you. Thanks for coming out and speaking and answering our questions today. One question is on the Lake Hazel improvements, I'll say from Cole to 5 Mile. Were those previously programmed and now pushed in this new proposed 5-year integrated plan?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Corliss. Yeah, so these were in the last iteration. So the presentation that Marissa had given, she had done the comparison from the 22-26. Well, we had an adopted integrated 5-year work plan, the 24-28, which is the current adopted. We're doing the 25-29. It was in that plan as well. We didn't have the gray lines you see here, just means we don't have a construction year identified, but we have other components of the project program, whether that be design phase, right-of-way phase, or something. We have that in the next 5 years that we're working towards. This just means we don't have a designated construction year. It's going to be dependent on funding availability as we get closer to that. But yeah, a lot of the roadways in the Southwest, we bundle together and they're going through the design phase now. Yes.
Okay. Madam Mayor, one follow-up. If we could talk about the orchard realignment. I know, as I understand, that's been halted due to some additional costs that were unanticipated by the city and ACHD. Is that something currently being looked into on what those costs would be?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, yes. So you'll still see it on our plan in the future. The previous iteration, we did have a year. This will be a very expensive project. And we also work very closely with our partners on what the important and the highest ranking projects that they have for the city. And that one did drop on the prioritization list that we received from the city of Boise. So when it drops to the bottom, we also want to be very reactive to what our cities are saying their highest priorities are for roadways. So yes, there was a lot of costs that came in, but I think the last estimate, and again, this does not include any cost escalations or mediation to the old dump that was there. We were pushing $30 million for that project.
And I'll jump in here. It because of the remediation costs and the expectation that the city contribute to those, we are looking for grants. It remains a priority, but if it stayed at the top of the list, it would prevent other things from being built. And with the news that we had to cover those costs of remediation that are required for the construction of the road, we didn't want to prevent other things from being built. So our team is currently looking for matches and federal resources to see if we can make it pencil and then get it back up there.
Okay.
It remains a priority, but it would have stalled other things.
Other projects, understood. Okay, one final question for the CHD, and this is going to require your crystal ball. If this project was approved and without seeing the roadway improvements, where would you see traffic traveling? What roadways would they be using?
Well, Madam Mayor, Councilman Corliss, I'm not sure that we have a really great answer for that. Christy may be able to, the other Christy, I am a Christy too, be able to provide a little bit more insight to that. But as Marissa Keith highlighted, to get to a freeway connection, you have Cole, you have Orchard, or all the way over the Eagle Road. Cole is not planned to go wider than 3 lanes south of Victory. Or we've got the Orchard Street realignment, but they would use the arterial networks, and how they use those is really dependent on where they're going. So I'm not sure that's where,
Okay.
I don't know that we can predict that at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I had one other question, but not for ACHD. Marissa had highlighted that we don't have response times. I think safety absolutely is a concern as we get to the edge of our town, be it in Southwest Boise or any other area. Do we capture that information, or is that somewhere we could get that from fire, police?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, we do have response time. We do measure response times, and we have a 5-minute response time standard for travel time. And this particular development falls outside the 5-minute. But the Whitney Fire District has different expectations than the city of Boise for fire response. So that's what they allow for it to the edge of their district. Again, we try to keep everything within the 5-minute, but if the city were to bring this in, we would expect to give them 5-minute response. And that would require additional fire station.
What is the Whitney response time expectation?
There is no standard.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just along that topic, Division Chief, the neighboring property locale does have a condition. I think it's 150 homes can be built before that fire station can go in. Is that correct? Do you know off the top of your head?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, there is specific language in the Syringa Valley specific plan regarding that area. And if I remember right, it was the Kirsten subdivision that was supposed to have, once their phase one was completed, there was supposed to be a plan in place, not a purchase or anything, but just a dedicated site for a fire station, which currently there is a proposed site in the BVA development at Orchard and Lake Hazel, but that was the extent of the requirement. And those subdivisions actually do fall within the 5-minute response time. So Muriel Farms just falls outside of it.
Madam Mayor, I actually have another ACHD question, but if there's more fire, maybe they want to go ahead right now.
Sure. Anybody else? All right, ACHD.
Sorry.
And I'm looking to this as the service provider Q&A right now. Is that what you meant by this? Great, as we're mindful of time.
Yeah, Christy, thank you. So Councilmember Halliburton brought this up, Marissa brought this up, the Lake Hazel extension. Since the Micron expansion, has there been a revisitation of Lake Hazel extension being added back into any kind of planning?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, there has been a single discussion. Our ACHD Commission requested that Micron take a look at opportunities. We did have an initial meeting with them at the request of our commission. That corridor, again, if we're talking about price tags, is it's quite lengthy and quite expensive. The last time a formal look was done was in 2008 when we worked on the Lake Hazel extension corridor study. That hasn't shown up on anybody's priority list in the recent years. Some Boise's now. There hasn't been, we've just had very small pieces of development there on the western end near Pleasant Valley. The portion of Lake Hazel that you see today from Orchard to Cole was built through a developers cooperative project, meaning ACHD had impact fee dollars. We worked with the developer and they built it and we paid them back. So it got done in a more rapid manner because they owned all the property and there wasn't right-of-way acquisition. But I'm correct, and it's only in its interim configuration for number of lanes. But at this time, we don't have any plans for Lake Hazel.
Thank you.
I've just been told that the other neighborhood association is online. And so I'm going to ask that Essie LaFrenz provide her presentation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I want to say thank you to Marissa for providing her presentation and comments on the project. And certainly South Cole backs up everything that Marissa included in her presentation. I want to say that the SWACA area and the South Cole area are two of the largest neighborhood associations by land area. I think we represent about 46,000 people, including the area of impact. And so, I just want to convey that the people in Southwest Boise are very concerned about the three top things that Marissa pointed out were residential sprawl, traffic, and the lack of coverage for the fire station. So I appreciate the comments by the council about leveraging this project to assist in quality of life for not only the residents of Muriel Farms, but also for the existing residents in Southwest Boise. And I want to say that the time to create a community is when we're developing a specific plan. And while we're updating the specific plan, I think we need to incorporate some of the things that the community is conveying, which is we're trying to build a community with quality of life that includes sufficient areas for workplaces, sufficient areas for recreation and parks, and of course, shopping. And I feel like this specific plan does not include that ability to have the quality of life aspect of it incorporated into it. We feel like this project is mainly a residential sprawl into the desert. And I recognize that we're trying to maximize developer profit and we're trying to maximize tax revenue, but to create a community where there's quality of life incorporates a lot of different land uses, and it is the perception of our community that we wish we could have more commercial space. And I do recognize that in the original specific plan for Muriel Farms, there was a lot more commercial space, and it was significantly reduced, and that's unfortunate. So having just a suburban area filled with houses mainly, it does require all of the traffic to travel up into the city. Everybody's trying to head north into the city to work, to recreate, and to shop. And so all of the traffic heads that direction. If there was a community built to our south that people could go to, that they could work at and shop at, there wouldn't be as much traffic traveling all one direction. Unfortunately, traffic is a big concern in my area. I hear it all the time. I want to just point to the Lake Hazel extension, the orchard realignment, super important to have that ability to get the people from the southern part of Boise or Ada County to where they need to get to a freeway. And so that freeway access could be Orchard. If not Orchard, they're probably going to jam pack up Cole, and that road isn't planned to be widened except for possibly 3 lanes. So certainly that's of utmost importance to our areas to get access to the city and the freeway. And then thirdly, I think the Maple Grove expansion is important as well, just because people are traveling north up into the city. The last thing is the lack of fire coverage, and we've talked about it as a neighborhood association board. We've talked about it as far as the locale subdivision as well, but we recognize that there was a document submitted for this project by the fire department, by the fire marshal, that said they would only like to see 400 additional units constructed before another fire station is required, not just located, where they're going to locate it, but it is required to be constructed. So if we have all this development already happening at locale, does that reduce the number of homes that they can add into Muriel Farms? I don't know, but we do recognize that there are plans for a fire department down near Lake Hazel, but not for about 10 years. So it's in like the 10-year plan. So that's a concern. Will we have adequate fire coverage in that area? And so just wanted to point out those top things from the South Cole Neighborhood Association. And thank you for letting me speak today.
Thanks, Esty. Sorry I hadn't seen you there.
That's okay.
Any questions for Esty?
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Morales?
Yeah. Thank you for all your service to South Cole Neighborhood Association, and appreciate your comments. I just wanted to ask you, ACHD's 2040 calculations without Muriel anticipates about an extra 8.5 minutes for peak travel in the mornings and an extra 9.5 minutes for peak travel in the afternoons. And so you're talking about that peak commute time. With Muriel, those commutes in the morning, you'd get an extra 2 minutes. In the afternoon, you'd have an extra 3.5. What I'm curious about, you talk about the need for more commercial. We had a testimony during the prior public hearing from a commercial developer that felt that this project probably pushed the demand in this area over to be able to provide a grocer in one of the commercial slots already approved in the locale development area. I guess, what are your thoughts on the net quality of life improvement or the net traffic reduction that might occur from being able to have more amenities nearby, so you're not having to drive all the way, to between Lake Hazel and Overland?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important to have options down here in Southwest Boise so that we have the option to stay local and not travel as far to get groceries on the weekend or um, go to a park and take our kids to play at the playground. And things like that are really important to the quality of life down here. And right now we recognize that there is traffic. If we live in Southwest Boise, we're going to hit traffic on the roads at the peak commute times, and that's just part of it. However, I'm advocating for the fact that these road expansions are super important to us to be able to get where we need to go. Certainly having the commercial down here alleviates some of that traffic.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah. SD, this is Kathy. I want to say thank you very much for coming out today and taking your time and all the work that you do for the South Cole Neighborhood Association. I think we hear the concerns from both yourself and also Marissa Keith with the Southwest Ada County Alliance. And this is just a quick question regarding commercial space out there. What would you see as the greatest need for commercial development? For example, would it be a grocery store? Would it be restaurants that would improve the quality of life for citizens in Southwest Ada
Yeah,
County?
I think both. I don't think there are restaurants really in Southwest Boise, and we just have the small Paul's Market that became Albertsons on Lake Hazel as a grocery store. So both. It's important that we have groceries and we have access to restaurants as well. Office space would be great if you know if there is that need for, maybe a dentist office or a, primary health building or something like that. So those things coming down into this area so that people don't have to travel quite as far.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right, Esty, thank you.
Thanks.
Now I'll open it up again, excuse me. I'll open it back up to other questions for the panel before Jessica wraps this up. I want to see if there's anything more.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I guess I've got a question for Mike, and it might extend to Dr. Eberly as well. I'm seeing kind of two different numbers. One, I think, was the starting price for the houses. And Mike, I think yours was was it 450,000? And then David, I think yours was maybe 527 or something like that. I'm trying to figure out what the difference there is.
Madam Mayor, council member, the starting price in the model now is 487,500. And I don't recall what Dr. Eberly's number was.
Was it 527, Dr. Eberly?
Thank you. Councilman Halliburton. Yes, in the model I use, because the 487 started back in 2023, 22, that when you bring it to present, it's actually 502 for DFAs. And yes, I had about 529 for the base case. And that is a review of using the prices in Columbia Village. What we did is we took the CAD program from ACHD and separated out all the single family homes from the other housing types, and then looked at those values there because it has similar location, it has similar amenities that Muro Farms contemplates, that it was used as a comparable in that case.
And Dr. Eberly, you're looking at those, you're looking at the prices today, or you're
Yes.
looking at the prices 3-4 years from now when the houses might actually get built?
Today.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Halliburton, yes, because then what happens is it compounds out in the model.
Sure.
And it makes a huge difference where you start.
Yeah, for sure. And Mike, maybe if you could comment why we're starting at different numbers there and why you've chosen the amount that you've chosen. And I guess, when you include that, I'm kind of wondering is that we're talking about the price today. I'm assuming that when any of this gets constructed, we're not talking about, you know, several years from now. And so are we using the price today, or are we guessing what the price is going to be, you know, 3 or 4 years from now when construction might actually start?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, we are looking at house prices today, and then we are adjusting them to the model, and Dr. Eberly has the same model, and he does have the correct number. He's seen it in the model we use for fiscal year 2025, which is tax year 2024.
Sure.
And it is 502,125. The 487,5 was actually last year's number, and then we were growing those house prices about 3% per year. So then going forward, they keep going up in value, and we have the houses starting out in year 3 or 4 is the assumption when houses would be built.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, can you tell me why your assumption, and maybe it's not a huge deal, but $27,000 less, why you're assuming a less price than what Dr. Eberly is assuming, and why we should be looking at your number as the one that we trust?
If his 529, the $27,000 higher figure is for fiscal year 25, tax year 2024, then yeah, there is a difference there. And I look at this as a developer has optimistic view of what homes may sell for. We have to be more conservative with the city, and our real estate manager, I talked with him at length, and he said, this is what I think is a good number. The other thing you sometimes see is home prices are X, and I think they may be using assessed values, but if you're using mid-year values when the housing market is better, assessed values are as of January 1.
Sure.
So there's a lag for the whole year where it's kind of common where people think the assessed value is a little bit low. But yeah, we have to be conservative. Developers probably have a view of the world where they think homes are going to sell for more, but we have to base our services on what we can reasonably expect to collect, and we just can't get too aggressive there.
Great, thank you. And sounds like maybe even different definitions of the word conservative, because David's conservative is higher than your conservative. So follow-up question there, and kind of along the same lines, what I'm hearing, Mike, you say is that when we're looking at price increases, you know, for the houses, or property value increases for the houses, we're not necessarily looking at a straight line on a 30-year trend. We're looking at it potentially dipping a little bit. And I think Dr. Eberly is saying, no, keep looking at the 3rd-year trend. Is this just going to go up and up? I'm trying to figure out where we have differences in how we're assessing the future property value of the houses. And what I'm hearing is Dr. Eberly has a higher value than what we're looking at as the city. No. And now he's shaking his head.
I'll go first. Madam Mayor, council member, we have that starting value, and we trued it up to the year. We've advanced the year just with time in this process. And so we are growing a straight 3% per year, going indefinitely. And we think that is a reasonable assumption. There's probably going to be some dips in there. There's going to be some higher years, but we think over time that is reasonable. As Dr. Eberly mentioned, when you have a model with many years, you start using a higher percentage, it really compounds. And what I got from his presentation was take the last 20 years. I don't know if I see the last 20 years as typical. The last 4 or 5 years in particular were very atypical with the pandemic and home prices nearly doubling. So we're aware that you just can't do that. The other thing is if you use a much higher assumption for home prices, our levy rates would adjust. And so we're capped at 3%. We have to be careful about pumping up the model with property tax through house inflation.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Eberly, can you tell me why you're shaking your head at me as words are coming out of my mouth?
Madam Mayor, Councilman, yeah, you're welcome to the weeds. Okay. Our model uses the same 3% as DFA's. We basically only changed the starting point. Now, what happens in the model, the way it's set up, just like your savings account, when you have a 5% interest rate, it compounds. So like your IRA or anything else, over time, it starts to grow geometrically, not linearly. So in fact, the growth rate is the same for DFA and the city of Boise. Now, it was my understanding in the discussions that DFA was looking closely at relative housing prices in the Southwest today. We took a look at the entire Ada County database, separated out the city of Boise, and the average single-family homeowner occupied house currently is at 531. So when we took our base case, we used 527, which was Columbia Village. We have no problem with DFA's values as a conservative case. And, you know, as they continue to discuss, they believe that we're not on a trend. And then a final point, it was, you know, the 28 years is the Federal Reserve Economic Database. And that does include 2008, which also has a dramatic decrease. So, you know, as always, historic trends tend to move, you know, our trends going into the future tend to move back towards historic trends.
Yep.
So anyway, this is, you know, theirs conservative, ours is more base, and we're still off the historic trend a little bit.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
might be.
I'm going to do a time check. We've got 15 minutes, and before that 15-minute hard stop, we need to have a hearing scheduled.
Quick question. Does our planning team reach out to the West Ada District to solicit comment, or is that just a passive? If they do, they do?
Oh, yeah, and we have Jessica wrap up too.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, we have reached out to the West Ada School District, but have not received any comments back from them.
Madam Mayor, I'm ready to, do you want to?
Well, I think Jessica's got some wrap up to just check in on.
A 1-minute wrap up, really.
Great. Okay.
Great.
Why don't we do that? See if anything.
Does the applicant have
comes to
anything
mind.
before?
If I may, very briefly, Madam Mayor, Council, just appreciate the conversation. We've heard a lot. We've taken a lot of notes. We did not receive questions on the topics that the Homeowners Association addressed, but it doesn't mean we're not listening to those comments. You know, we were informed coming into this that our presentation should be about fiscal, so we've narrowed it to that. But we're still listening very carefully to all the other conversation and appreciate it. And a lot of those topics we did address at the hearing, but we'll be prepared to continue to address those, you know, as you have questions and at the hearing. So anyway, thanks for letting us be a part of that and hear all of that. Just wanted to explain why our presentation was a little more limited, but we're interested in all of it. Great. Thank you.
Great. And to wrap up, just to remind council, so there are 2 questions before you. The first is whether to annex the 380 acres. And in that, we're looking to support the findings for contiguous development, inclusion of the city's sewer extension policy, balancing costs, and prevention of leapfrog development. The other application is to adopt the specific plan, and in that we look at the amount of housing, other amenities, including open space, commercial, schools, adjacent development to give context to the project, as well as the road network and traffic. And from that, we look at the revenues from the project and the associated costs through build out. So the project is before council for a decision with a recommendation for denial from planning and zoning. And from the May 7th council hearing, where council deferred and directed staff to return within 120 days, working with the applicant and have associated work sessions. We've now met that with that direction from the last hearing. And so where we stand is direction on future hearing dates, as well as we will need eventually a new version of the specific plan to incorporate the requests to date with staff and with the applicant. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would move to direct staff to schedule this item for a public hearing on November 12th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Council, we'd like all of council to be here, so this is the last chance to speak now or forever hold your peace on whether or not you're going to be there. Okay, looking good.
That's it? All right.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I guess, unless are you making another motion after this, or is this it?
I'd like to make another one.
All right, we'll just vote on this
Or
one. then.
we can add it. Let's add it.
I guess my question, supportive of the motion. I think there's some unclarity for council about the orchard alignment and Lake Hazel extension. And I think that it's important for there to be a full understanding of both of those and where the city's at on that before we actually get to the public hearing. And so I'm hoping there is an opportunity, perhaps offline or, in a session to discuss those in more detail so that everybody has a clearer image of what those could look like or what it would take to get those projects underway.
Madam Mayor, I would say I don't think it's necessary to have all the parties involved in that. I think simply having ACHD and the city discuss those two projects would be of interest in a work session. So I'd amend my motion to set a public hearing for this item on November 12th and have a work session between now and then discussing the two items related to orchard alignment and Lake Hazel extension as recommended by Councilmember Halliburton.
Second.
You agree to the change?
Yes, yeah.
All right. And with that, you've set the date for the 12th for the Murio Farms piece, but we'll establish the date for the work session another time. Okay, great. Clerk?
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Willetts. 5 in favor, motion carries.
All right, we will adjourn and be back here at noon.